I used to believe that betrayal only happened in movies, in books, in stories about other people's lives. I never imagined it would become the foundation of my own. She was not just my wife. She was the person I trusted more than myself. We met when we had nothing, no money, no connections, no safety net. Just youth, ambition, and a belief that love could survive anything. We rented a tiny apartment above a noisy street, where car horns never stopped and the walls were so thin we could hear our neighbors breathing. But we didn't care. We were building something together. Or at least, that's what I thought. I worked 2 jobs at first. During the day, I handled logistics for a shipping company. At night, I helped run a small online business that we had started from our living room. She managed the finances because she was better with numbers, or so she said. She handled the accounts, the invoices, the paperwork, and all the things I didn't have time to look into. I trusted her completely. I never checked. I never questioned. I never imagined I needed to. Slowly, the business grew. We moved into a better apartment. Then a house. We bought our first car. Then a second one. People around us started saying we were lucky, that we were successful, that we were the perfect couple. And I believed it, because I wanted to believe it. I wanted my life to make sense. But there were signs. There were always small things I ignored. Late nights she couldn't explain. Phone calls she took in other rooms. Bank statements she said she would show me later but never did. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself that real trust meant not asking questions. That real love meant giving someone full freedom. I was wrong. One morning, everything ended. It was early. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The room was still dark when someone knocked on the door. Not a normal knock. Heavy. Official. Loud enough to shake the walls. I opened the door in my sleep clothes, confused, half awake. 2 police officers stood outside. They said my name. I said yes. They asked me to step outside. I didn't understand why. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone had stolen something using my name. Maybe it was a misunderstanding that would be solved in 5 minutes. They showed me a warrant. Fraud. Financial crimes. Money laundering. The words didn't even feel real. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. It didn't match my life. It didn't match who I was. I looked at her. She stood behind me, quiet, pale, her arms crossed like she was protecting herself from something. I asked her what this was about. She didn't answer. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look surprised. She just stood there, silent, watching me as if I was already gone. That was the moment everything inside me collapsed. I asked the officers to give me a minute. I turned toward her and whispered, "Tell them this is wrong." She didn't. She looked at the floor. And in that silence, I understood something that words couldn't explain. She had done this. They took me away while the neighbors watched. While people whispered. While the life I built leaked out of my hands like sand. At the station, they showed me documents. Accounts in my name. Transfers I never made. Signatures that looked like mine. But weren't. She had moved money through companies I didn't even know existed. She had created a trail that led straight to me and nowhere near her. Every document had my name on it. Every crime had my face on it. I kept saying the same sentence over and over again. This is not me. But paperwork speaks louder than truth. By the time I was allowed to call a lawyer, the story was already written. I was the criminal. She was the victim. She cried in front of people. She said she had no idea. She said she trusted me. She said I had destroyed her life. And everyone believed her. I watched from a glass room as my own wife described me like a stranger, like a monster, like a man she never knew. I didn't recognize her. Or maybe I never truly had. That night, sitting alone in a cold room with metal walls, I replayed every moment of our life together. Every smile. Every promise. Every time she said we. I wondered when we became me. I wondered when love became a weapon. I wondered how someone could build a life with you, sleep beside you, plan a future with you, and at the same time slowly design your destruction. The worst part wasn't the fear. It wasn't even the loss. It was the understanding that I had helped her do it. By trusting her. By never questioning her. By believing that love was enough. When they finally locked the cell door behind me, I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the wall, realizing that everything I thought was mine, never truly was. My home wasn't mine. My business wasn't mine. My life wasn't mine. It had been borrowed. And now, it had been taken back. By the one person I never thought I needed to protect myself from. The first thing prison takes from you is your sense of time. Days stop feeling like days. They stretch into something thick and heavy that presses against your chest from the moment you wake up. The lights turn on at the same hour every morning, but mornings don't feel like beginnings anymore. They feel like reminders that you are still there, still trapped, still forgotten. My cell was small, colder than it needed to be, with walls that seemed to absorb sound and return it as echoes of other people's pain. At night, I could hear coughing, crying, shouting, sometimes laughter that sounded broken and forced. No one laughed because they were happy. They laughed because silence hurt more. The mattress was thin. The blanket smelled of old sweat and disinfectant. I stopped noticing after a while. You learn quickly in prison that dignity is not something you're given. It's something you hide. I kept replaying her face in my mind. The way she looked at the floor instead of at me. The way her silence screamed louder than any confession ever could. It haunted me more than the bars, more than the guards, more than the locked doors. I wasn't angry yet. I was confused. Confusion is worse than anger because it has no direction. It just spins inside you until you feel sick. I kept thinking there must be a mistake. That someone would come and say they had found the real criminal. That the truth would rise on its own like it always does in stories. But this wasn't a story. This was my life. And in my life, the truth was buried under paperwork, signatures, and carefully planned lies. The other inmates didn't care who I used to be. Inside, everyone is reduced to a number and a crime. They asked me what I did. I said I didn't do anything. They laughed. Not in a cruel way. In a tired way. Everyone says that. So I stopped explaining. I started observing. I watched how people survived in a place designed to slowly erase them. Some became violent. Some became numb. Some turned into shadows that moved and ate and slept but weren't really alive anymore. I didn't want to be any of those. So I started building something inside myself that they couldn't take. A routine. I woke up early. I exercised in the small space I had. Push-ups, sit-ups, pacing back and forth until my legs burned. Not because I wanted muscles, but because I needed to feel control over at least one thing. I started going to the library. It was a small room with old books and uncomfortable chairs, but it felt like oxygen. It felt like a door to somewhere else. I read everything. Business books, biographies, psychology, finance, economics, technology, anything that taught me how the world worked beyond those walls. I learned how money moves, how companies grow, how people think, how systems are built and how they fail. I learned that most success isn't about intelligence. It's about positioning, timing, understanding patterns before others see them. I wrote notes on scraps of paper, on the back of forms, on anything I could find. Ideas, models, plans. Not for revenge. Not yet. For survival. For rebirth. I started talking to people. Not everyone. Just the ones who looked like they still had something left inside them. There was a man who used to run a logistics company before bad decisions and worse partners took it from him. There was another who understood coding and systems better than any engineer I had ever met. There was an older man who had lost his empire in the financial crisis and could explain markets like they were living creatures. We talked for hours. Not about prison. About life. About mistakes. About what we would do differently. about what the world would look like when we stepped back into it. Slowly, something changed. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. Victims wait. I started seeing myself as a student. Students prepare. And prison became my classroom. Not a fair one. Not a gentle one. But an effective one. The hatred I thought I would feel toward her never fully formed. Instead, it turned into clarity. She didn't destroy me. She revealed the world to me. She showed me how dangerous trust can be. How powerful information is. How fragile identity really is. I watched guards who abused their power. Inmates who manipulated others. Systems that claimed to be about justice but ran on convenience. I realized the world outside wasn't much different. It just had better lighting. Better words. Better disguises. Every month, I marked time in my head. Not by days. By growth. What did I learn this month? What do I understand now that I didn't before? What mistake will I never repeat? I wasn't counting down to freedom. I was building toward it. I imagined my future in detail. Not a fantasy. A blueprint. Where I would start. Who I would avoid. What I would never do again. What I would build instead. I imagined walking out not as someone grateful to be free, but as someone ready to be dangerous to the old version of the world. Not with violence. With knowledge. With preparation. With patience. By the time years had passed, I no longer felt small. The walls didn't feel smaller. I felt bigger. They couldn't see it. The guards couldn't. The inmates couldn't. But inside me, something solid had formed. A version of me that didn't need approval. Didn't need validation. Didn't need anyone to believe him. I wasn't broken anymore. I was sharpened. And one day, when the gates finally opened and my name was called, I didn't feel excitement. I felt calm. The kind of calm you feel before a storm you fully understand. I stepped outside with nothing in my hands, but everything in my mind. And that was enough. By the one person I never thought I needed to protect myself from. Freedom didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt loud. Too many sounds, too many colors, too much movement all at once. After years of grey walls and predictable routines, the world felt chaotic, like a machine that had been running without me and didn't care that I had returned. I walked out with a small bag, a few clothes, and a mind full of plans that had nowhere to go yet. No one was waiting for me. No family. No friends. No apologies. Just a sidewalk, cars passing by, and a sky that felt too big. I didn't feel sad. I felt empty in a clean way, like a room that had been cleared of everything and was finally ready to be built again. The first thing I did was disappear. Not in a dramatic way. In a practical way. I moved to a city where no one knew my name. I rented a small room and took a job that didn't ask questions. I needed stability before I needed success. I needed invisibility before I needed power. At night, I worked on ideas I had carried with me for years. I wrote business models, market analyses, risk maps. I didn't rush. Rushing is what gets you noticed. And being noticed is dangerous when you're rebuilding. I watched the economy. I watched trends. I watched where money was moving and why. I learned that the world wasn't run by the loudest voices. It was run by the quiet systems behind them. Supply chains, data, infrastructure, ownership. I started small. I invested what little I had into something boring. Logistics software. No glamour. No headlines. Just a system that helped companies move things faster and cheaper. It worked. Not explosively. Steadily. Reliably. The best kind of growth. I reinvested everything. I lived simply. No luxuries. No celebrations. Just progress. One contract became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became partnerships. I built a network. Not of friends. Of value. People who needed what I offered. People whose success was tied to mine. That's how power actually grows. Not by controlling people, but by becoming necessary. Years passed. Money stopped being something I worried about and became something I directed. I built companies under different names, different brands, different layers. Not to hide, to protect. I learned that visibility is a liability. Privacy is an asset. I wasn't chasing wealth. I was building structure. Something that couldn't collapse easily. Something that could survive mistakes. Markets fell. Markets rose. My systems adapted. That's how I knew I was doing it right. When the world shook, I didn't. I hired carefully. I trusted slowly. I verified everything. Trust was no longer emotional. It was procedural. I stopped expecting loyalty. I designed incentives. People behave exactly as their incentives tell them to. I wasn't bitter. I was realistic. And realism made everything easier. At some point, I realized I had crossed a line. Not a moral one. A financial one. I no longer needed to check prices. I no longer needed to think about rent. I no longer needed to say no because of money. I had become what people call wealthy. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like alignment. Like things finally made sense. I remembered who I used to be. The man who trusted easily. The man who believed in shared dreams. The man who thought love and honesty were enough to protect him. I didn't hate him. I felt sorry for him. Not because he was weak. Because he was unprepared. The world rewards preparation, not goodness. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. And closure, I realized, wasn't about her. It was about me proving to myself that she hadn't ended me. That her story wasn't the final version of mine. That my identity was not what had been written in court documents and police files. It was what I built after. I checked her life from a distance. Public records. News articles. Business listings. She had done well. She had built on what she had taken. She had turned theft into growth. She had used my fall as her foundation. It didn't make me angry. It made me focused. Not on destroying her. On reclaiming what was built from my bones. Not emotionally. Structurally. I started positioning myself in the same industries. The same financial spaces. Not directly. Strategically. I bought small stakes in companies around hers. I entered markets she depended on. I became part of the environment she needed to survive. Quietly. Slowly. I didn't rush the ending. Endings are only satisfying when they are inevitable. I waited until my presence was unavoidable. Until my name, my companies, my resources, were part of the background of her success. She didn't see me. She saw the benefits. She didn't feel me. She felt the support. And one day, without drama, without confrontation, I was no longer beneath her world. I was beneath its foundations. And whoever controls the foundation decides what stands and what falls. I didn't feel powerful. I felt calm again. The calm that comes when your life finally belongs to you. Not because no one can hurt you, but because even if they try, you already know how to rebuild. Stronger. Smarter. And this time, untouchable. I returned without announcing myself. No calls. No warnings. No dramatic entrance. Just a quiet reappearance in a city that no longer remembered me. Cities have short memories. They remember faces only when those faces are on billboards, on screens, on court cases. Mine had disappeared long ago. That anonymity was a gift. It let me move through familiar streets like a stranger, watching a life I once had from the outside. Her life had become bigger. Better cars. Better buildings. Better clothes. A better version of the world she had taken from me. She moved with confidence now. The kind of confidence people have when they believe their past is buried and their position is permanent. I knew better. Nothing is permanent. Especially not power. I didn't approach her. I approached what supported her. Her banks. Her partners. Her suppliers. her investors, her infrastructure. I followed the money, not the person. Money tells the truth people hide. I learned where her debts lived, where her contracts breathed, where her risks were sleeping. And then I placed myself there, not as a threat, as a solution. I offered capital when others hesitated. I offered stability when others demanded control. I offered patience when others wanted quick returns. And people welcomed me, because the world always welcomes what it needs. They didn't see revenge. They saw value. I acquired influence the way water fills space. Slow, natural, unstoppable. One board seat here, one partnership there, one loan restructure, one silent acquisition. No headlines, no celebrations, just quiet control accumulating in my hands. She began to feel it before she saw it. That's how it always works. You feel the shift before you understand it. A contract suddenly more expensive. A supplier suddenly less flexible. A bank suddenly more cautious. The ground starts changing under your feet, and you don't know why. She started pushing harder, working longer, demanding more. But pressure doesn't create power. It reveals weakness. And hers was hidden under speed. She had built fast. Too fast. On systems she didn't fully understand. On relationships she didn't fully control. On money that wasn't truly hers. She had built upward, not downward. She had built height, not foundation. I had built the opposite. And now my foundations were underneath her towers. I attended meetings she didn't realize I owned. I approved budgets she didn't know depended on me. I influenced outcomes she thought were random. I didn't hurt her business. I optimized it. I made it more efficient, more profitable, more stable. And in doing so, I made it more mine. People don't notice control when it improves their lives. They notice it only when it takes something away. So I took nothing. I only repositioned. Until one day, she walked into a room and saw me. Not as a memory. Not as a ghost. But as a presence. Not behind glass. Not in handcuffs. But at the head of the table. Her reaction was subtle. A pause. A breath held too long. A micro-expression of recognition she couldn't hide. She knew. I didn't smile. I didn't greet her. I didn't acknowledge the past. I treated her like any other executive. Professionally. Politely. Distantly. That hurt more than anger ever could. Because anger gives importance. Distance gives irrelevance. She tried to speak to me privately after the meeting. I declined. Not because I was afraid. Because conversations are where people try to rewrite history. I didn't want a new story. I wanted the truth to finish the old one. She started unraveling quietly. Mistakes appeared. Decisions became rushed. Confidence turned into control. Control turned into paranoia. She felt watched. She was. Not by me. By reality. When systems shift, those who relied on them feel exposed. She had always believed she was smarter than everyone else. That belief had protected her more than any contract. Now it betrayed her. She made moves to protect herself. Moves that created traces. Traces that led to old files. Old transactions. Old signatures. Old truths. I didn't dig. I allowed others to dig. Auditors. Compliance teams. Regulators. People whose job it is to see what others want hidden. I simply removed the obstacles that had been in their way. The case didn't reopen with drama. It reopened with paperwork. That's how real justice moves. Not with sirens. With folders. With signatures. With dates and numbers and patterns that finally made sense. She tried to fight it. Lawyers. Public relations. Narratives. Victimhood. But narratives don't survive evidence. Evidence doesn't care how you feel. It only cares if it's true. She started losing things. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Control. Credibility. Allies. Silence. She saw me again at another meeting. This time her eyes weren't confident. They were searching. Asking. Begging. Not for mercy. For explanation. I gave her none. Because explanations are gifts. And she had already taken enough. I didn't destroy her. I stopped protecting the system that had been protecting her. The world did the rest. That's the difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge is personal. Consequence is inevitable. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't joyful. I was calm again. The same calm I had felt walking out of prison. The calm of alignment. The calm of things finally returning to their proper place. She had built her life on my fall. Now she was standing on my foundation. And foundations don't belong to those who stand on them. They belong to those who built them. And I had built mine with time, patience, and pain. The only materials that last. The end didn't feel like an explosion. It felt like a quiet settling. Like dust finally falling after a long collapse. People expect justice to be loud. To be dramatic. To be satisfying in the way movies train us to expect. But real endings are often silent. They arrive in letters, in emails, in court dates that no one attends except the people who have no choice. Her case didn't become a headline. It became a file. One among thousands. That was her punishment. Not attention. Not infamy. Irrelevance. She wasn't dragged away. She wasn't shouted at. She was processed. Reduced to forms, signatures, and decisions made by people who didn't care about her story. They cared about the facts. The same facts that had once buried me now uncovered her. I watched it happen from a distance. Not hidden. Just unnecessary. The system didn't need me anymore. It had enough. I didn't go to the courtroom. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't need to witness it. I had already lived it. Twice. Once as the victim. Once as the architect of my own return. I thought I would feel victory. I didn't. I felt release. Like something heavy that I didn't realize I was carrying had finally been put down. I stopped thinking about her. That's how I knew it was over. When a person no longer occupies your mind, they no longer have power over your life. I sold some of the things I had built around her world. Not out of kindness. Out of closure. I didn't want reminders. I wanted distance. Not physical. Psychological. I kept what I had built for myself. The systems. The companies. The independence. The calm. I simplified my life. I moved again. Not to run. To choose. I chose a place with less noise. Less ambition. Less hunger. I chose space. I chose time. I chose mornings that weren't rushed and nights that weren't anxious. I chose to be a person again, not just a strategy. I started doing things that had nothing to do with growth. I read for pleasure, not advantage. I walked without a destination. I talked to people without measuring their usefulness. It felt strange at first. Like learning a new language. I realized I had spent so long becoming unbreakable that I had forgotten how to be soft. Not weak. Soft. There is a difference. Softness is a choice. Weakness is a lack of options. I finally had options. I thought about the man I was before. The one who trusted easily. The one who believed love was protection. The one who thought life was fair. He wasn't wrong. He was just early. He believed in a version of the world that required everyone to be honest. I had learned to live in the version that requires you to be prepared. Both versions are real. They just exist at different stages of understanding. I didn't regret becoming who I became. But I also didn't want to stay him forever. Power is a tool. Not a home. I had used it. Now I was done with it. I started mentoring quietly. Not publicly. Not with speeches. Just conversations. Helping people avoid the mistakes I made. Not by warning them about betrayal. but by teaching them about structure, about systems, about not building their lives on things they don't control. I didn't teach fear. I taught clarity. Fear makes you defensive. Clarity makes you intentional. I met people who had lost everything. I met people who were about to. I didn't save them. I helped them see. That was enough. Sometimes people asked about my past. I kept it simple. I said I had started over. That's all they needed to know. Because that's all it really was. Not revenge. Not justice. Not triumph. A restart. On my terms. I understood something in the end that I couldn't understand at the beginning. She didn't take my life from me. She returned it to me. Stripped of illusions. Stripped of lies. Stripped of dependencies. She didn't make me powerful. She made me responsible. For my choices. For my trust. For my future. And that was a gift disguised as a wound. I no longer needed her story to define mine. I no longer needed an enemy. I no longer needed a villain. I only needed myself. The version that knows how to fall. And how to rise. And how to walk away when the fight is already won. The world didn't clap. It didn't care. It moved on. And so did I. Quietly. Fully. Finally.